Imagine this, you're holding a 240-page book filled with strangely smooth, confident handwriting. But what exactly does it contain? Inside, you'll discover plants that don't exist on Earth, cosmological diagrams of distant galaxies, and images of women bathing in the intricate plumbing systems of an unrecorded era. This is the Voynich Manuscript, a true holy grail of cryptography that has defied human intellect for over a century. The Voynich is not an isolated case. Throughout history, many writing systems have died twice. Once when the civilization that created them faded away, and again when the last people who could read them took their secrets to the grave. Yet, modern science, aided by supercomputers and artificial intelligence, is tirelessly searching for answers, not just to understand the characters, but to resurrect the thoughts buried by time. Join me as we explore 10 ancient codes where the line between profound knowledge and history's most elaborate hoaxes remains blurred. For the past 112 years, people have relentlessly tried to decipher it. Since 1912, it's been a constant endeavor. It was Wilfred Voynich, an antique book dealer, who purchased it from the Mondragone Villa in Frascati, Italy. Accompanying it was a letter dated 1665, claiming the book once belonged to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who supposedly paid 600 gold ducats for it. A substantial sum, equivalent to the value of a small estate. Rudolph's court was particularly fascinated by alchemy, cryptography, and the occult. Given his penchant for collecting strange and dangerous items, this book perfectly fit both criteria. The manuscript contains approximately 170,000 characters composed of about 37 distinct glyphs. Remarkably, not a single character shows signs of error or correction. There are no crossed-out words, no hesitations, and no ink blots from an uncertain hand. Clearly, whatever was written here is the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. In 2009, the University of Arizona sent parchment samples for radiocarbon dating, and the results placed its creation between 1404 and 1438 AD, with 95% confidence. This dating alone debunks most theories of it being a hoax. This is crucial because it confirms the manuscript's very early origins, predating the sophisticated forgery markets we see today. In 2003, computer linguist Gordon Rugg proposed a hypothesis. The text might have been generated by a carding grid, a device designed to create random content that sounds plausible, but is, in fact, utterly meaningless, devoid of any deeper message. For a moment, this hypothesis seemed to be the definitive answer. However, in 2013, linguist Marcello Montemurro published a study in PLOS One, demonstrating that the word distribution in the manuscript adheres to Zipf's law, a distinctive statistical signature found only in genuine natural languages. You simply cannot fake Zipf's law with just a grid and a few simple dice. This law only emerges when a language genuinely carries meaning. The plants drawn throughout the manuscript don't match any known species, yet they are depicted with astonishing precision, as if taken from a scientific manual, not the product of a whimsical imagination. Evidently, these illustrations are not random. They were drawn by someone with clear intent. In 2019, Gerard Cheshire, a researcher from the University of Bristol, published a peer-reviewed statement asserting that the language in the manuscript is Proto-Romance. However, within mere weeks, 4 independent linguists publicly and unanimously rejected that decipherment. The manuscript once again defied all attempts at decipherment. Even William Friedman, the NSA analyst who successfully deciphered Japan's Purple Code in World War II, one of history's most renowned cryptographers, spent years studying the Voynich manuscript, but ultimately passed away without finding a solution. The ink's composition, unlike the vellum, has never been dated. This leaves open the possibility that new text could have been added to the old pages at a later time. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, most scholars still believe that the manuscript is either an incredibly sophisticated hoax, designed to extract money from Rudolph's court, or a personal cipher whose key has been permanently lost. They argue that statistical language-like patterns can be mechanically reproduced without encoding any true meaning, much like Rugg's carding grid experiment was once thought to have demonstrated. However, a hoax written merely to impress a Renaissance emperor fascinated by mysticism would not require 240 pages, an internally consistent grammar, and such a complex Zipf's law word distribution. To fool a king, you don't need statistical linguistics, you just need dragons and gold leaf. and a cipher with no surviving key is, by definition, a language someone chose to bury. Some researchers wonder if the Voynich Manuscript is an artificial language, an individual's attempt to create an entirely new system of thought, similar to how the 12th century mystic Hildegard of Bingen created her own 23-character alphabet. Others have noted that the cosmological sections do not align with any known European, Arabic, or Persian astronomical traditions, as if the person who drew them was observing from an entirely unfamiliar sky. Could this manuscript be encoding knowledge from a tradition we have never before recorded? Perhaps we'll never uncover the answer. That void is truly regrettable, as we felt we were so close to grasping it. What truly vexes historians is a writing system they know was effective, whose later forms they can read effortlessly, yet the original, found in a mysterious book within an Italian villa, remains stubbornly undecipherable. Let's journey across the Mediterranean to a civilization that has been lost to oblivion for 4 millennia, shrouded in profound silence. The writing system of the Indus Valley Civilization. In its heyday, the Indus Valley Civilization was the greatest Bronze Age society on Earth, surpassing even Egypt and Mesopotamia. Its cities featured grid-patterned streets and a sophisticated drainage system, superior to anything in Europe. It came with a letter dated 1665 claiming it once belonged to. However, they left behind only just over 4,200 inscribed artifacts, with each inscription averaging merely 5 characters. To this day, we have yet to decipher any of these characters. This writing system was first discovered by British archaeologist Alexander Cunningham in 1875. Systematic excavations at the sites of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro began in the 1920s under the direction of John Marshall of the Archaeological Survey of India. Since then, over 100 serious attempts at decipherment have been published, but not a single one has withstood expert scrutiny. Over the past century and a half, despite diligent research by the most brilliant minds in linguistics and archaeology, the mystery of this civilization remains unraveled, with absolutely no progress. This writing system comprises approximately 400 unique symbols. This number is truly astonishing, as it's far too many compared to a typical alphabet, which uses fewer than 30 symbols, yet far too few when placed alongside a complete logographic system like Chinese, which boasts thousands of characters. The majority of the inscriptions are less than 5 characters long. The longest known text consists of a mere 26 characters. These symbols are primarily found on small seals made of steatite, roughly the size of a postage stamp, and each inscription averages a mere 5 characters, a paltry number across a vast territory spanning approximately 1.5 million square kilometers, from Afghanistan to Gujarat, indicating that the most common form of writing left by this civilization was also just 5 characters long. In 2009, researchers Rajesh Rao, Nisha Yadav, and their colleagues published a study in the journal Science, demonstrating that the complexity of the symbols in this script is comparable to natural written languages, rather than mere labeling systems. In fact, statistical analyses suggest that a genuine language once thrived here. However, counter-arguments emerged almost instantly. In 2004, linguist Steve Farmer, alongside Richard Sproat and Michael Witzel, asserted that this writing system was not a language, but rather a form of emblem or symbol, more akin to iconography than conventional speech. Despite presenting evidence of short inscriptions and the absence of recurring grammatical structures, both factions have yet to find a definitive answer. Despite countless studies being published, both sides have been unable to decipher the inscribed seals, which invariably feature unique animal motifs. Among these, the unicorn is the most common image, followed by cattle and elephants. Notably, there is also a seated figure in a yoga-like posture, possibly a proto-Shiva deity. Interestingly, this civilization had clear records of trade with Mesopotamia. Indus seals have been found in the ancient city of Ur in modern-day Iraq, demonstrating that these two civilizations not only exchanged goods but almost certainly also engaged in linguistic exchange. Yet what's peculiar is that despite decades of contact, no Mesopotamian scribe ever recorded a single Indus word. Asko Parpala from the University of Helsinki has dedicated his entire research career since the 1960s to arguing for a connection between this script and the Dravidian language family. However, this hypothesis still lacks conclusive evidence. In academic circles, the prevailing view now is to acknowledge both possibilities equally. Either this script encodes a Dravidian language, or it is merely a non-linguistic administrative symbol system. conveying meaning without recording speech, lacking a bilingual key, similar to a Cretan version of the Rosetta Stone. In truth, both these positions remain purely speculative. This civilization vanished around 1900 BCE, and the absence of any other texts has made complete decipherment, according to current consensus, truly impossible. However, a civilization sophisticated enough to maintain standardized drainage systems and uniform weights across a vast area of 1.5 million square kilometers surely required more than 5 symbols to operate itself. Some researchers even question whether the characters on the seals are not a complete writing system, but merely shorthand or administrative abbreviations of a much grander script, once recorded on cloth, wood, or palm leaves, and now vanished without a trace. If this is the case, then we are not failing to decipher an ancient script, but are actually staring at its receipts, while the entire library of knowledge has long turned to dust. So then, where did those longer texts end up? Could it be that the Indus people deliberately hid their records before abandoning these cities? And if Dravidian is indeed the language family, then why have 150 years of research by Tamil and Telugu scholars still failed to produce any convincing matches? The Indus script truly puzzles us with its immense scale, thousands of artifacts, yet not a single clue to even begin deciphering it. There's truly no discernible entry point for understanding it. However, the next case leaves us utterly stumped for a completely opposite reason. Imagine a writing system so isolated on a remote island that the last people who could read it were abducted, unable to pass on any of their knowledge. In 1862, a horrific tragedy struck. Peruvian slave raiders landed on Easter Island, abducting around 1,500 people. Nearly half the population vanished in a single raid. Even more tragically, among those abducted were the island's intellectual elite, priests, chiefs, and all the literate men and women. Just 4 years later, disease and forced labor had claimed them all, with only a handful of fortunate individuals managing to return. Although those fortunate few returned home, by then Rongorongo, a writing system considered unique across the Pacific, had completely lost its readers. Catholic missionary Eugene Arrow first reported this script to Western scholars in 1864, but ironically, by the time researchers arrived to document it, there were no literate people left. By 1869, Bishop Florentine Etienne Jason of Tahiti obtained a tablet. He found a former Easter Island resident who seemed to chant it in a very strange rhythm. But investigators concluded that he was merely reciting a memorized text, rather than actually deciphering the hieroglyphs. That performance only proved the script had meaning, but failed to reveal what its true meaning actually was. To this day, we have only found 25 wooden tablets and other objects inscribed with Rongorongo. Across these 25 artifacts, the Rongorongo script features about 120 basic signs, which combine to form around 1,000 distinct glyphs, potentially even up to 500 to 2,000 unique characters, creating incredibly complex hieroglyphs. What's unique is that it's written in boustrophedon style, meaning you read alternate lines in reverse, and after each line, the reader must rotate the entire tablet. Unfortunately, to this day, there has been no widely accepted academic translation, not even for a single complete line of text. These 25 precious remaining artifacts are currently scattered across major research institutions in Rome, St. Petersburg, Washington, D.C., Santiago, and Honolulu. And remarkably, a complete collection has never been assembled for simultaneous study in a single location. It wasn't until 1996 that linguist Stephen Fisher published a purported decipherment of a particular tablet, the Santiago Staff. He read it as if it were an epic saga detailing the universe's creation. Even though the article was published in the Journal of Oceanic Linguistics, specialists in the field haven't fully embraced it as the definitive work. Rongorongo script bears absolutely no visual resemblance to any other writing system on Earth, whether Mayan, Chinese, or Egyptian hieroglyphs. Consequently, most researchers categorize it as an independent invention. Remarkably, this stands as one of the rare independent inventions across the entire span of human history. The characters within this writing system are predominantly human and animal figures, meticulously arranged to form a continuous narrative. This stands in stark contrast to the isolated administrative symbols commonly found in most other ancient writing systems. This strongly suggests their content is ritualistic or literary in nature, rather than mere bookkeeping or inventory records. According to the oral traditions of Rapa Nui, this script was personally brought to the island by its founding king, Hotu Matua, and only the sacred chieftain class, the Ariki Mau, possessed the ability to read and comprehend it. This transformed writing into a tightly controlled religious technology. Carbon dating of the wooden tablets suggests they could date from the 15th to the 19th century, but it's crucial to note that the wood used for carving was driftwood. This implies that the script itself, etched onto these objects, could have existed for centuries, potentially even predating the very artifacts that bear it. In a single documented event, the devastating slave raid of 1862 alone claimed the lives of approximately 1,500 people. Within just 4 years, European-introduced diseases decimated the returning population, leading to a precisely dated cultural extinction. Most researchers perceive Rongorongo as an incomplete writing system, perhaps serving merely as a mnemonic device to encode the core ideas of ritual texts, rather than a fully developed phonetic or ideographic script. The scarcity of information about the script prior to its systematic documentation has rendered it permanently undecipherable, unless a groundbreaking new discovery emerges. However, if it were solely a mnemonic device, there would be no necessity for such an intricate system comprising 2,000 complex characters. To simply recall a song, you wouldn't need to rotate the tablet 180 degrees between lines of text, would you? The intricate structure of Rongorongo suggests it's a system capable of recording novel ideas, rather than merely prompting the recall of pre-memorized information sequences. Researchers at the Santa Fe Institute employed statistical analysis and uncovered that Rongorongo exhibits the characteristic entropy signatures of a natural language. If true, this stands as the sole unique writing system ever to emerge from Oceania, a sprawling region of over 25,000 islands. Tragically, the last individuals who could read this language were wiped out within a mere 4 years of their first contact with colonial civilization. Scholars continue to debate whether this script was an independent invention on Rapa Nui, or if it journeyed from South America through pre-Columbian exchanges, especially as mounting evidence suggests Polynesians and Americans interacted long before Europeans set foot there. Rongorongo slipped into obscurity when its readers were abducted. The subsequent writing system remains undeciphered, perhaps because it predates the very concept of literacy as we understand it in the Pacific. Let's journey back 5,000 years to uncover the planet's most ancient bureaucratic administrative system, Proto-Elamite, which first emerged in 3200 BCE in the city of Susa, located in what is now southwestern Iran. Imagine someone pressing a reed into a damp clay tablet. They weren't composing epic poetry or chronicling history. They were simply tallying sheep. The system they employed represented the most sophisticated information technology on Earth at that time. Yet, for the next 5,000 years, not a single character of it could be deciphered. The earliest Proto-Elamite clay tablets were unearthed in Susa by French archaeologists in the late 19th century. Extensive analysis of this system truly began with the groundbreaking research of Pierre Amier in the 1960s and 1970s. As of 2012, roughly 1,600 of these enigmatic clay tablets had come to light. The UCLA Cuneiform Digital Library Project meticulously photographed all discovered tablets in high resolution and made them freely available online, with the explicit aim of inviting the global community to join the decipherment effort. Thousands of dedicated researchers have painstakingly scrutinized these tablets. Despite these efforts, the writing system stubbornly remains undeciphered. Proto-Elamite now holds the distinction of being the world's oldest undeciphered writing system, remarkably predating even early Sumerian cuneiform. It encompasses roughly 1,000 distinct signs, which consistently appear on clay tablets with unequivocally administrative content. While we can discern numbers and quantities of goods, the underlying language of these signs, along with the precise meaning of the majority, remains an enduring enigma. These 1,600 clay tablets are dated to a period spanning approximately 3,200 to 2,900 BCE. It was in continuous use for roughly 300 years across an expansive territory, stretching from Susa all the way to modern-day Afghanistan, encompassing an impressive 1.5 million square kilometers. This was no mere record-keeping system for a small village. It was the sophisticated administrative documentation of a formidable empire. During the 1970s and 1980s, researchers Robert Englund and John Freiberg made the crucial discovery that the Proto-Elamite language employed a base 60 numeral system. Did you know that this base 60 system, originating from ancient Babylonian mathematics, still forms the fundamental basis for how we measure time and angles today? This stands as compelling evidence of the profound intellectual exchange that occurred between ancient civilizations. Yet, ironically, the very writing system that holds these insights remains completely undecipherable. In 2012, the CDLI project, an open access initiative from UCLA, published all known inscriptions, issuing an urgent global call for collaborative decipherment. However, without any verifiable breakthroughs, the research community has yet to achieve success. Proto-Elamite script appears to have no discernible origin in any previously known writing system. Even though contemporary, its genetic relationship with Proto-Cuneiform remains unclear. This suggests the intriguing possibility of an independent invention in Iran, developing in parallel with the emergence of writing in Mesopotamia. It's truly astonishing that two distinct civilizations achieved the same technology almost simultaneously. Numerous clay tablets record numbers alongside pictographic symbols. However, it's perplexing that the same pictographic symbol appears in contexts referring to both grain and personnel. Even at their most basic function, these symbols defy consistent interpretation. Around 2900 BCE, this script abruptly vanished, leaving no clear successor system. It was subsequently replaced by cuneiform script imported from Mesopotamia, suggesting either cultural assimilation, conquest, or perhaps even both. The most prevalent explanation posits that Proto-Elamite was likely an administrative accounting system, encoding only a partial representation of language. It was sufficient for recording quantities and categories, but inadequate for capturing complete sentences or narratives. Its sudden disappearance, coupled with the absence of any bilingual texts, renders complete decipherment by current academic consensus essentially impossible without new archaeological discoveries. However, its sheer scale utterly refutes that explanation. 1,600 tablets maintained in a consistent format across a vast area of 1.5 million square kilometers for over 300 years demand a robust institutional infrastructure, schools, scribes, administrative hierarchies, well-trained personnel, and a sophisticated documentary culture. You don't build such a monumental system merely for simple bookkeeping. You build it for a civilization that truly thinks in language. Some researchers even question whether Proto-Elamite truly recorded a single unified language at all. So, did these diverse regions share a single set of symbols to capture their unique local languages? It forged a visual communication medium, bridging spoken language without the need for phonetic sound recording. If true, this could represent the very first writing system deliberately designed to transcend all language barriers. In some ways, it was even a more sophisticated communication technology than any alphabet. Did it vanish because a conquering culture supplanted it, or because the very civilization that birthed it opted for an alternative? Perhaps we may never truly uncover the answer. The clay tablets stubbornly cling to their secrets. Proto-Elamite script continues to tantalize and haunt us, for while we can grasp its numbers, its words remain stubbornly beyond our decipherment. Moving to the next writing system, we encounter an entirely different, yet equally profound enigma. We can distinctly hear every single syllable, yet remain utterly unable to grasp any of the meaning concealed within. This, then, is the Meroitic script. Imagine mastering a language's written form flawlessly, every letter, every sound, every rule of pronunciation. Then you open a book, only to find yourself utterly unable to comprehend a single word. And that is precisely the perplexing fate that befell Meroitic in 1909. A British Egyptologist remarkably succeeded in cracking the phonetic code of this language in a mere matter of months. Yet despite 116 years having passed, we remain utterly incapable of translating it. Francis Llewellyn Griffith unveiled his groundbreaking decipherment of the Meroitic alphabet in 1909 within the pages of the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology. The phonetic values were swiftly determined, largely because Meroitic had borrowed characters from Egyptian Demotic script, thus forging a crucial bridge between the known and the enigmatic. Griffith traversed that bridge with remarkable speed and precision, only to arrive on the other side and uncover a language that no living soul could speak. Meroitic was actively in use from approximately 300 BCE. Until 400 CE, this written civilization flourished continuously for 7 centuries, extending across a kingdom that, at its zenith, commanded a territory even vaster than modern-day Egypt. This writing system manifested in 2 primary forms: Meroitic hieroglyphic, reserved for grand, monumental inscriptions adorning temple walls and tomb facades, and Meroitic cursive, employed for more mundane, everyday administrative purposes. While both scripts share the 23-character alphabet deciphered by Griffith, much of it remains an enigma. We can only translate a rather limited vocabulary, primarily consisting of titles and names. Did you know that the Kingdom of Kush, which utilized this very script, actually constructed more pyramids than Egypt itself? In Meroe alone, some 255 royal pyramids still stand, towering majestically in the Sudanese desert. They form clusters with their steep triangular peaks sharply defined against the sky, a breathtaking scene that has remained virtually unchanged for 2 millennia. Despite over 1,200 inscriptions found in Sudan, most remain untranslatable. We can decipher the sounds, but their profound meaning continues to be a significant mystery. The only words we definitively understand are royal titles, proper names, and funerary formulas. In essence, it's a meager vocabulary of just 50 words, repeated tirelessly across the 1,278 stelae we've discovered. As of 2007, this was certainly no small corpus of texts. Claude Rilly from CNRS in Paris proposed an intriguing hypothesis. Meroitic belongs to the East Sudanic language family, sharing a distant connection with modern Nilo-Saharan languages. However, the proposed cognates are still insufficient for us to achieve a complete translation. This connection is as tenuous as a thread, far from the robust strength of a rope. This is simply because we haven't found any Meroitic Egyptian bilingual texts longer than a few royal names. Even though these 2 civilizations shared administrative borders and maintained diplomatic relations for centuries, Roman Emperor Augustus still had a monument erected right in Meroe. Following his military campaigns there in 24 BCE, both sides meticulously documented this historic encounter. Intriguingly, the Roman accounts are perfectly legible, while the Meroitic documents remain stubbornly unreadable. Mainstream academia, particularly linguists, largely concur that Meroitic is indeed a genuine language belonging to the East Sudanic branch. The biggest hurdle is the data itself. We only know approximately 200 words, and the existing corpus is overwhelmingly dominated by repetitive funerary texts. There simply isn't enough vocabulary to reconstruct its grammar or significantly expand our translation efforts. Finding more inscriptions in diverse contexts would be incredibly helpful, but unfortunately, none have yet been discovered in settings that break away from the established patterns. Yet 1,278 inscriptions, that's hardly a small corpus, is it? Egyptian was successfully deciphered from a significantly smaller amount of data. The crucial difference is that Egyptian had Greek, serving as the bilingual bridge on the legendary Rosetta Stone. Meroitic, however, lacks that fortunate bridge. For 7 centuries, these 2 neighboring civilizations navigated a complex relationship, marked by vibrant trade, fierce conflicts, and intricate diplomatic correspondence. Remarkably, not a single scribe ever documented a text in both languages. The sheer perfection of this informational void makes it incredibly difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. Some scholars have pondered whether the consistently funerary nature of the surviving Meroitic inscriptions offers a vital clue. If the script was more widely employed on perishable materials, and the stone inscriptions are merely intentionally restricted sacred funerary records, then we are essentially deciphering Meroitic gravestones. This implies we're striving to reconstruct an entire civilization based solely on their epitaphs. It's widely believed that their laws, medicine, literature, and even the intricate governance of a kingdom larger than Egypt itself were once meticulously documented on now lost materials. Today, all we have left are the names of the departed, and the echoes of words whose profound meanings have vanished with them into eternity. Leaving the banks of the Nile, we journey across the Atlantic to the New World, where a groundbreaking yet highly contentious discovery is challenging academics to fundamentally rethink their approach. In 1999, near the town of Cascajal, Veracruz, Mexico, road workers digging through a pile of rubble unexpectedly unearthed a hard object. They unearthed a serpentine block, roughly the size of a hefty dictionary. Its surface was intricately covered with 62 carved symbols, meticulously arranged in neat rows. Archaeologists have dated this block to approximately 900 BC. Should this dating be verified, it would establish this as the oldest writing system in the Western Hemisphere, predating Maya script by at least 350 years. Rather than being met with triumphant celebration, the academic community's response ignited a fierce debate. The block was brought to the attention of scholars by a local collector, having been unearthed through unofficial excavation. In September 2006, a research team spearheaded by Mary Poole, John Justison, and Terence Kaufman from the University at Albany formally unveiled this discovery in the esteemed journal Science. This was a highly reputable research team, publishing in an esteemed scientific journal, utilizing a robust methodology. Yet, mere weeks after its publication, doubts concerning the block's authenticity and interpretation began to surface. This serpentine block measures 36 by 21 by 13 centimeters. It weighs an estimated 12 kilograms. Stratigraphic analysis has revealed that this site belongs to the San Lorenzo phase of the Olmec civilization, flourishing from 1200 to 900 BCE. There are a total of 62 signs, yet they represent only 28 distinct types. What's truly astonishing is that these 28 sign types bear no direct resemblance to any known Mesoamerican writing system, be it Maya, Zapotec, or Epi-Olmec. If this truly is the ancestor of later Mesoamerican writing systems, then it remarkably resembles none of its descendants. In their 2006 scientific study, Paul Justison and Kaufman discovered that some signs frequently appear in repeating pairs, a characteristic statistical pattern indicative of syntactic structure in natural languages. Syntax always leaves distinctive traces, and those fingerprints are clearly visible right here. Archaeologist Andrew Lawler reported in Science magazine that this discovery was immediately met with skepticism from researchers, particularly Stephen Houston from Brown University. He pointed out that because the stone block was excavated in an unofficial context, its stratigraphic certainty was significantly diminished. Unfortunately, the area was not fully documented before the block was removed, and those gaps in the evidence have never been fully addressed. Examining the block's surface, we can clearly see signs of previous erasures and recarvings. In fact, at least a few signs were carved over older marks, indicating that this block was used repeatedly. It served as a kind of scratch pad, a surface that could be freely reused and modified. Through iconographic analysis, scientists have found connections between some of the signs and familiar Olmec motifs. Signs depicting corn and insects, deeply associated with the Olmec supernatural world, reveal that these symbols were not created in isolation. Instead, they evolved from an existing repertoire of imagery, demonstrating that writing didn't simply emerge out of nowhere. Something undoubtedly existed before it, and who knows, there might be many other fascinating discoveries still buried beneath the earth. Astonishingly, over a century of archaeological exploration into the Olmec civilization has yet to yield a second inscription like Cascajal. This block truly stands as a singular text, the most isolated example of writing we know of in all of Mesoamerican scholarship. The current prevailing view accepts it as genuine, but considers it merely an early, isolated experiment, rather than proof of a developed Olmec writing tradition without any other examples. Since it remains undeciphered, it's plausible this is merely a personal or local innovation, rather than a fully developed writing system. Yet, the Olmecs managed to carve colossal stone heads, some towering 3.4 meters high, and transport massive basalt blocks across 80 kilometers of treacherous swamps. They laid the foundational groundwork for a rich tapestry of art and beliefs that every subsequent Mesoamerican civilization, including the Maya, would fully embrace. The notion that they lacked a writing system isn't a conclusion drawn from evidence, but rather a presumption born from a simple absence of proof. However, some researchers contend that this perceived void of evidence is steadily being filled. Kaufman and Justison propose that the Cascajal block represents a crucial proto-writing stage, predating Epi-Olmec script and ultimately leading to the Maya writing system. This implies that the genesis of all New World writing systems can be traced back to the Olmecs, not the Mayans. Should this hypothesis prove true, the entire narrative of writing in the Americas would need to be fundamentally rewritten. Some researchers pose an even more tantalizing question. If the Olmecs indeed possessed a writing system, and their heartland has been shrouded for centuries by dense tropical vegetation and vast swaths of the area remain unexcavated, what other secrets lie hidden beneath the earth, simply awaiting a chance discovery by a passing road worker? Leaving behind the contentious discoveries in Mexico, let's journey to an Aegean island, where an ancient civilization bequeathed two distinct writing systems, one we've successfully deciphered, and another that remains an enigmatic, unsolved mystery. In 1952, a brilliant British architect named Michael Ventris achieved the monumental feat of deciphering Linear B, the administrative script of Mycenaean Greece. This was hailed as one of the 20th century's most profound intellectual triumphs, as it unveiled that Linear B encoded an early, archaic form of the Greek language. Historians erupted in jubilant celebration until someone pointed out an even older script residing in the very same museum display, Linear A, bearing strikingly similar symbols, the same island, the same culture, yet utterly impenetrable. It was Arthur Evans who unearthed both of these scripts during his excavations at Knossos between 1900 and 1905. A staggering 47 years after Evans's initial discovery, Linear B was finally and successfully deciphered by Ventris. Since then, Linear A has been the subject of relentless study, yet the number of deciphered characters remains a stark, unyielding zero. It predates Linear B by several centuries and is believed to encode the authentic Minoan language, a tongue with no known surviving relatives in any language family on Earth. Approximately 1,500 Linear A inscriptions have been unearthed, scattered across Crete, the Greek islands, and even as far afield as Israel and Turkey, testifying to the vast administrative and commercial reach of a Bronze Age palace culture. This writing system is quite unique, featuring around 56 syllabic characters and an additional 150 to 200 hieroglyphic signs. Fortunately, its numerical system has been quite clearly deciphered, allowing researchers to somewhat understand the accounting records concerning quantities. However, the words used to name the objects being counted remain a major enigma, yet to be solved by anyone. In other words, we can read the numbers, but we're completely stumped by the accompanying nouns. John Chadwick, who famously collaborated with Ventris to decipher Linear B, also tried his hand at Linear A. In 1958, he concluded that Minoan was likely a language isolate, unrelated to any other known language. Just think, if the person who cracked the later writing system was stumped by the earlier one, then this problem truly becomes even more intricate, doesn't it? The Phaistos disc, an artifact discovered in 1908 at the Minoan Palace of Phaistos, features 241 signs, including 45 unique symbols arranged in a strikingly unusual spiral pattern. Who knows, perhaps this is a third type of Minoan script whose mysteries we have yet to unravel. Or worse, what if it's merely a sophisticated forgery? To this day, it remains one of the most fiercely debated mysteries in archaeology, with no definitive solution ever gaining widespread acceptance. These Linear A clay tablets typically surface primarily in administrative and religious areas, such as palace storerooms or sacred mountaintop shrines. This suggests it was a tightly controlled script, likely imbued with sacred significance, rather than a common writing system accessible to everyone. Coincidentally, the transition from Linear A to Linear B occurred precisely at the time of the Mycenaean conquest of Crete. Around 1450 BCE, the Minoans didn't lose their script to the sands of time, but rather to an invasion. This fact is clearly documented by Eve Diu in her 2011 research published by Cambridge University Press. While a few Linear A words can tentatively be linked to familiar Aegean place names, its grammar remains utterly enigmatic and perplexing. Today's scholars largely concur that Minoan is a language isolate. Consequently, deciphering it without a bilingual text is considered an almost impossible task. For over a century, researchers have tirelessly hunted for a Rosetta Stone of Crete, but, regrettably, none has yet surfaced. Even with perfect phonetic reconstruction, we only get meaningless sounds, disjointed syllables that can't form coherent sentences. But language isolates don't just appear out of thin air, do they? Every language has its own ancestors and origins. Just because we haven't yet found its sister languages doesn't mean Minoan is entirely alone or without relatives. This might suggest that those kindred languages have utterly vanished. When the Mycenaeans conquered Crete, they had every administrative incentive to dismantle the literacy of the civilization they supplanted. This was crucial for establishing their own scribal class, language, and proprietary record-keeping. The late scholar Cyrus Gordon, back in 1966, once posited a link between Linear A and Semitic languages. While initially dismissed, this theory occasionally resurfaces, prompting researchers to revisit and reconsider its implications. These scholars highlight that the Eastern Mediterranean was far from the isolated world early archaeology once envisioned. Others ponder, could the Phaistos disk be a crucial bilingual key, inscribed in a third script, bridging Linear A with something we've yet to decipher or correlate? If Linear A truly holds the secrets of Minoan theology, law, and medicine, then all that knowledge remains, locked within 1,500 inscriptions, patiently awaiting the precise question that will unlock its mysteries. Linear A lies concealed behind the script it spawned, which itself is veiled by an even more ancient civilization, potentially serving as the progenitor of today's diverse writing systems. Leaving the Aegean behind, let us now venture into the desert. The Wadi el-Hol inscriptions, once etched by ancient soldiers and merchants, are the very genesis of the writing systems now employed by half the world's population. In 1994, two Egyptologists, while traversing a remote desert track, serendipitously discovered a series of carvings etched into a limestone cliff face. These weren't the familiar Egyptian hieroglyphs, but something far cruder, more spontaneous, inscribed by a different hand with entirely distinct intentions. Upon identifying their discovery, they suddenly grasped that they were gazing upon the most ancient alphabetic system ever unearthed. It had lain undisturbed in an Egyptian desert, 50 kilometers southwest of Luxor, for an astonishing 3,800 years, hidden from human eyes. John Coleman Darnell and his wife Deborah made this groundbreaking discovery while meticulously surveying ancient Egyptian desert routes, as an integral part of their ongoing archaeological endeavor. They unveiled their findings alongside Frank Moore Cross and other esteemed colleagues in 2005 within the prestigious Annals of the American Schools of Oriental Research. Their precise dating was established through associated texts, Egyptian Middle Kingdom hieratic writings, meticulously carved on the very same cliff face by contemporary Egyptian scribes, offering an exceptionally reliable chronological anchor. Every alphabet on Earth, encompassing Latin, Greek, Arabic, Hebrew, Cyrillic, and hundreds of other derived writing systems, traces its lineage back to a singular Proto-Sinaitic invention. Wadi el-Hol dramatically pushed back the timeline of that invention by 200 to 300 years beyond all prior evidence, crucially relocating its origin not in Sinai, as scholars once presumed. Yet, it was within Egypt itself that Semitic-speaking soldiers employed by the Egyptian army during their expeditions etched these very inscriptions. Presently, two primary inscriptions endure, one vertical and one horizontal, each containing approximately 20 to 25 distinct symbols. Despite their brevity, these symbols carried a pivotal phonetic value, robust enough to unequivocally declare their alphabetic essence. Epigrapher John Coleman Darnell meticulously identified these symbols as direct precursors to later alphabetic letters, specifically the nascent forms of Aleph, Beth the ox head, House, and Lamed the shepherd's crook. These were, in essence, the foundational shapes that would evolve into the letters A, B, and L. Frank Moore Cross, a preeminent Harvard scholar of Semitic epigraphy, meticulously analyzed these inscriptions, unequivocally affirming their alphabetic character. By 2005, a publication from ASOR delivered the most authoritative academic endorsement for this groundbreaking discovery, the academic community's resounding recognition. The geographical location itself held profound significance. Wadi el-Hol was strategically situated along an ancient desert thoroughfare, a vital artery linking the Nile Valley with the oases of the Western Desert. This was a crucial lifeline, serving both military objectives and as a bustling trade route, frequently utilized by Egyptian expeditions to recruit Semitic mercenaries from Canaan. These were foreigners toiling in Egypt, immersed daily in the intricate hieroglyphs of this ancient civilization. They ingeniously adapted the acrophonic principle, where a symbol represents the initial sound of the word it illustrates, to brilliantly encode their own spoken language. Drawing from this compelling evidence, it becomes clear that the alphabet was not the exclusive invention of a single grand civilization. Instead, it was forged by soldiers, right there on a dusty road. The inscriptions remain only partially deciphered, some symbols still lack consistent phonetic values, and both texts are simply too brief to allow for a definitive determination of their grammar. Beyond preliminary identification, what we see here is unmistakably early Northwest Semitic. Academic consensus now firmly establishes Wadi el-Hol as compelling evidence that the alphabet was ingeniously crafted by Semitic speakers in the service of the Egyptians around 1900 BCE. This groundbreaking revelation places its origins squarely in Egypt rather than Sinai and significantly predates previous assumptions about its birth. Yet, if the alphabet was indeed forged by soldiers serving Egypt around 1900 BCE, then why did Egypt, a civilization renowned for meticulously documenting everything, from grand military campaigns and grain harvests to even intimate love poems, never embrace its revolutionary simplicity? For 5 long centuries, the most profoundly literate civilization of the ancient world employed individuals who wielded a revolutionary new writing technology, yet they utterly disregarded it. Some researchers ponder whether the alphabet's invention was deliberately stifled by the powerful Egyptian scribal class. For these scribes, mastery of hieroglyphic literacy was the very bedrock of their social power and professional standing. An alphabet, learnable in mere days rather than years of arduous scribal training, would have democratized Egyptian writing and, in doing so, rendered their esteemed profession utterly obsolete. The alphabet, perhaps ironically, survived and flourished precisely because of its foreign origins, its inherent portability, its informal nature, and its remarkable resistance to control by any single established institution. Could the Wadi el-Hol inscriptions be the sole surviving evidence of a literacy that the Egyptians once sought to suppress? And along those desert paths, are there other undiscovered inscriptions still silently waiting? The Wadi el-Hol inscriptions completely revolutionized the history of human writing, and what's remarkable is that they were stumbled upon by chance on a limestone cliff. The final writing system on this list was deliberately decoded, with its entire methodology widely published. Once published, these discoveries were quietly overlooked by a scientific discipline, as they struggled to reconcile the answers these findings offered. Even before Linear A, Cretan hieroglyphics showed more ancient vestiges engraved on minuscule stone seals, fitting perfectly in the palm of a hand. They were impressed onto clay tablets slightly larger than a hand, discovered in palace archives and on items traded across the Aegean region. Cretan hieroglyphic predates Linear A by 400 years. They are almost certainly the ancestor of Linear A, yet are so poorly understood that most textbooks on ancient writing systems completely overlook them. It was Arthur Evans who identified Cretan hieroglyphic as an independent writing system during his excavations at Knossos in the early 20th century. The modern catalog compiled by Yves Duhoux and Anna Morpurgo-Davies in 1992, along with the precise sign list published by Silvia Ferrara from the University of Bologna in 2012 in her work Mycenaean Texts and Contexts, have become the official reference materials for this field. According to the current reference catalog, we are aware of approximately 320 artifacts inscribed with this writing system. A mere 320 objects, that is the entire surviving corpus of a writing system that connected, through 2 documented intermediate stages, to an alphabet still widely used today. Cretan hieroglyphic is considered the ancestor of Linear A and the confirmed ancestor of Linear B, a system that has been deciphered and proven to encode early Greek. There is a direct link, an unbroken flow, from these tiny seal stones to the writing systems used by hundreds of millions of people. We know its destination, but we cannot read its origin. This writing system comprises approximately 96 syllabic signs, along with an undetermined number of ideograms, a significantly larger number than Linear A, which has only about 56 syllabic signs. The clear simplification between these 2 writing systems suggests a deliberate streamlining over time. This could have been a reform by scribes, an administrative decision, or a conscious reduction in complexity. Cretan hieroglyphic documents have been discovered at Knossos, Malea, Petras, Corte, Mu, and on the island of Samothrace, demonstrating their administrative influence extended beyond Crete itself. Clearly, these were not merely local records, they were widely circulated. Researchers can trace the morphological origins of approximately 30 to 40 Cretan hieroglyphic signs from corresponding signs in Linear A. However, the phonetic values assigned to the descendant signs in Linear B cannot necessarily be retroactively applied to the original signs. The chain of succession is clear, but the meaning encoded from the origin remains an enigma. Did you know that Cretan hieroglyphs are found exclusively in palace administrative texts? There are absolutely no public inscriptions, monuments, or personal items bearing this script. All evidence points to their exclusive presence within strictly controlled areas inside the palaces. This is a point on which scholars universally agree. Scholars often regard Cretan hieroglyphs as the predecessor to Linear A, likely recording an early form of Minoan. However, the scarcity of texts, which are exclusively administrative, makes deciphering it without a bilingual text a virtually impossible task. Currently, researchers primarily focus on documentation and classification, rather than attempting translation. This is a highly practical and pragmatic approach, especially considering the limited evidence at hand. What's truly striking, however, is that the transition from Cretan hieroglyphs to Linear A coincided precisely with a catastrophic disaster that decimated the entire civilization, around 1700 BCE. This could have been earthquakes, civil strife, followed by a massive reconstruction effort. Consider this. Writing systems don't spontaneously simplify or standardize in the wake of a disaster, do they? Someone must have deliberately made the decision to replace one writing system with another, precisely when everything lay in ruins. That decision surely conceals a secret we have yet to uncover. A handful of scholars, such as Jan Best, have put forth a bold hypothesis that Cretan hieroglyphs actually encoded an early form of Greek rather than Minoan. If this hypothesis proves true, it would completely rewrite history, pushing back the appearance of Greek speakers in the Aegean by a staggering 800 years. However, this proposal is not widely accepted by scholars, yet ironically, its rejection is partly predicated on the fact that Cretan hieroglyphs cannot be clearly read, making it equally impossible to definitively disprove. Some researchers ponder, was the replacement of this script with Linear A an attempt to simplify it for broader use, a democratization of literacy within the palace after a societal upheaval? Or was it, conversely, a deliberate act of re-encoding, designed to restrict access for a new ruling class intent on erasing the vestiges of the old? The collapse of the ancient palaces and the concurrent shift in writing systems align in such a peculiar manner that it's difficult to dismiss them as unrelated. While some might attribute this to mere coincidence, the tablets themselves seem to narrate a story of something far more deliberate. Cretan hieroglyphs seem to lurk behind Linear A, which in turn lurks behind Linear B, the script we are fortunate enough to read. It's as if we're navigating a long corridor confronted by countless locked doors. The final writing system on this list, however, appears to have opened a new door. One researcher confidently declared he had stepped through it, yet, regrettably, an entire field of study quietly opted not to follow his lead. In 1985, a scholar published a decipherment of the Byblos syllabic script, an ancient Bronze Age writing system discovered in the very city that gave birth to the word Bible as we know it today. His methodology was exceptionally rigorous, and the results were remarkably consistent. This decipherment was presented to the academic community, yet it was neither refuted nor lauded. It was simply shelved. And to this very day, this enigmatic writing system remains officially undeciphered. Between 1929 and 1932, Maurice Dunand excavated 10 bronze and stone stelae inscribed with the Byblos syllabic script in the ancient Phoenician city of Byblos, located in modern-day Lebanon. Dunand subsequently published initial descriptions of these artifacts in 1945. In 1985, George Mendenhall of the University of Michigan published a decipherment proposal through the University of Michigan Press. He identified the language as early Phoenician and successfully deciphered the longest inscription, a bronze plaque uniquely known as the spatula. It was a royal dedicatory text. His decipherment yielded a remarkably coherent Semitic vocabulary. However, the research community showed little enthusiasm for it. The spatula plaque alone contained approximately 225 signs. In total, the entire corpus of text across all 10 objects amounts to roughly 1,000 signs. Though not as vast as some other text corpora, its scope is on par with documents successfully deciphered from ancient civilizations. This script combines ideograms, syllabic signs, and determinatives, forming a complex system akin to Egyptian hieroglyphs. This perfectly aligns with the profound knowledge its creators possessed regarding Egyptian writing. Byblos emerged in Egyptian records as a trading partner around 2600 BCE. For millennia, they supplied cedar wood from the Lebanese mountains to Egypt, receiving papyrus in exchange. This papyrus link was critically important. In Greek, biblos means papyrus. From biblos came biblion, meaning book. And it was from biblion that the city of Byblos derived its name, a city that provided the ancient world with writing material, papyrus, and later the very word book to Western civilization. They employed a script that remains officially untranslated to this day. Peter Kyle McCarter, a scholar of Semitic inscriptions, after examining Mendenhall's decipherment, observed some highly compelling sign value assignments. This offers partial corroboration from a credible source. While the full text remains contentious, its controversial nature doesn't equate to outright rejection. In 2010, Sylvia Ferrara and her Oxford colleagues performed a computational analysis. Applying symbol frequency and statistical methods to the Byblos corpus, their findings confirmed it exhibited the entropy profile of a natural language. These statistics strongly suggested that something was indeed encoded within it. Scholars have noted this discovery, yet the prevailing consensus remains that the Byblos syllabic script has not been officially deciphered. This is because no proposed reading has garnered widespread acceptance from the academic community. The limited size of the corpus means that any decipherment cannot be independently verified across a sufficient number of distinct texts. Moreover, the informal conditions of the 1929 to 1932 excavation led to chronological uncertainties, further complicating contextual analysis. These are valid, well-founded concerns, yet Mendenhall's decipherment has never been definitively disproven. This decipherment has been questioned, even sidelined, in a field where such breakthroughs are hailed as among the highest intellectual achievements, where Ventris and Champollion are revered as legends. A plausible reading has been put forth, yet the academic community has declined to investigate it further. That silence, in itself, speaks volumes. Some researchers have begun to ponder its implications. Some scholars have posited that the Byblos syllabic script represents the crucial missing link, bridging Egyptian hieroglyphs and the Phoenician alphabet. This marks an intermediate stage in one of the most consequential technological transfers in human history. The Phoenician alphabet, devised in the Levant around 1050 BCE, stands as the direct ancestor of Greek, Latin, Arabic, and Hebrew. If Mendenhall's theory holds true, then the city that bestowed upon us the word Bible is also the very place that gifted us the writing system which ultimately brought it into being. And yet, we remain unable to confirm this, simply because the academic community has not pursued this question with sufficient depth. It has been met with skepticism and overlooked in a field where decipherment is celebrated as one of the highest intellectual achievements, where Ventris and Champollion are revered as legends. Could we unearth more Byblos hieroglyphic inscriptions hidden deep beneath the unexcavated layers of this ancient mound? So, if this truly is early Phoenician, what compelled the Phoenicians to abandon such a sophisticated, comprehensive writing system in favor of the simplified alphabet they later spread across the globe? The answer to this question remains an enigma. Thus, this treasure trove holds 10 writing systems, 10 civilizations, 10 unfinished stories, not due to a lack of intellect or effort, but because of the relentless erosion of time, catastrophic misfortunes, and simply what serendipitously survived to this day. What mysterious thread connects the Voynich Manuscript to the ancient seals from the Indus Valley? And what about Rongorongo with Proto-Elamite? Could it be Linear A with Byblos hieroglyphs? There is no conspiracy at play here. In reality, it's an incredibly simple, yet unexpectedly brutal, rule. Writing possesses the power to endure, far outliving its creators. Languages can wither, communities can vanish, treasures of knowledge are reduced to ashes. All that remains are characters etched into stone, clay, wood, or parchment, confidently asserting that something once existed, yet utterly silent on how to decipher them. In most cases, the widely accepted and genuinely reasonable academic view is that these scripts remain undeciphered due to a critical lack of linguistic context. For instance, we lack a bilingual text, a surviving descendant language, or an unbroken oral tradition to serve as a bridge. To decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs, we needed the Rosetta Stone. For Linear B, it was the related syllabary of Linear A and Ventris's brilliant intuition. Without a similar bridge, even with a complete list of symbols in hand, we can only utter meaningless sounds. That absence is self-evident. Scholars acknowledge this not to conceal anything. They are merely being transparent about the limitations of their evidence. Yet some researchers are beginning to pose new questions. Is this absence merely coincidental, or did some writing systems vanish precisely during historical periods marked by conquests? Linear A completely disappeared after the Mycenaean invasion. The Rongorongo script disappeared in the wake of a slave raid, an event whose timing is remarkably well documented. Then there's the Byblos syllabary, from a city that changed hands between empires for 2 millennia, and the Meroitic script, which thrived for 7 centuries in close contact with Egypt, yet, astonishingly, neither left behind a single bilingual record. The Indus Script, which flourished across a vast expanse of 1.5 million square kilometers, bafflingly left no lengthy texts anywhere. Perhaps these are mere coincidences, or simply that literacy, in these specific instances, left no discernible trace. Yet some researchers aren't entirely convinced that mere random coincidence accounts for everything that transpired. In truth, what we confront in all 10 of these cases is the sheer limitation of what has survived, and, more perilously, mistaking that limit for the actual extent of what once existed. We often assume that civilization inherently leaves its mark, and that significance automatically guarantees permanence. Yet, the Voynich Manuscript endured precisely because its perceived value was high enough to warrant its careful preservation. The Rongorongo tablets survived because they were sold to missionaries just before that entire tradition faded into oblivion. The Proto-Elamite tablets endured simply because clay is far more resilient than palm leaves. The vast majority of what the ancient world thought, debated, recorded, and argued has vanished, not because it remains undeciphered, but because it simply no longer exists, lost to time, long before we ever had a chance to seek it out. What we possess today is merely the serendipity of chance. A seal that wasn't swept away, a cliff face no one ever needed to clear, or a manuscript simply too peculiar to be thrown out. Most people simply glance at these artifacts in museum display cases, read the label proclaiming undeciphered, and then casually move on. But you didn't move on. You stayed, sitting with 10 civilizations spanning millennia, and offered us something we still cannot decipher. And you felt the profound significance of it all. This is far from meaningless. It is the most authentic connection to the past any of us could ever hope to forge. These 10 writing systems are 10 doors, each patiently awaiting the perfect key. These scripts are not failures of the ancient world. Rather, they are an enduring invitation from it, still wide open, still patiently awaiting the right combination of evidence, technology, and the relentless persistence of inquiry. As this video begins, you'll find yourself holding a book that no one has ever managed to read. It's 240 pages of confidently penned script detailing plants that exist only in imagination, accompanied by a cosmological diagram drawn from a sky that remains, to this day, unidentified. By the end of this video, you'll have encountered 10 other civilizations who did precisely the same, etching their legacies onto clay, stone, and bronze. They held a steadfast belief that one day someone would comprehend their messages. Their faith wasn't misplaced. They merely underestimated the sheer expanse of time required. These voids might leave us feeling disheartened, yet it is precisely this mystery that serves as a powerful impetus, driving humanity relentlessly forward in its quest for discovery. Successfully deciphering one of these ancient systems is far more than just translating a line of text. It is, in fact, the profound act of restoring a voice to souls long silenced and forgotten by the annals of history.